And our operations in the water sector is about 2 billion a year. So this is a business, something we do in about 48 developing countries. When we go to the developing countries, one of the things we have to go is assess their water situations before we can make any investment. And then we ought to be able to tell them what to do. I've been on and off involved with the PUB and trying to understand its work. When you look around the Asia-Pacific region, there are many times, almost all the times, we look at the Singaporean experience and see how we can take them. And sometimes tell the government, sometimes pardon me by not saying this is from Singapore. Sometimes we say this is the best practice to do it. And there are countries who've done it. And there are 3-4 things that comes very clear. One which has been said over and over again is the leadership and commitment. Sometimes we do go and talk to the ministers or the Prime Minister that tell them we have a 5-year plan on the water. This is what we want to do. And there are other times when you go and talk to the utilities who look at very good people who can actually do the same. Sometimes the vision is there's no implementation, and there are people who are the implementation, there is no vision. And I think therefore the Singapore story is very useful for us to tell to the governments that the leadership and commitment at all levels is important. At all levels. People who will be able to see it, people who will be able to implement, like the implementation will be the PUB, the vision would be the highest level which has been mentioned many times here. The second approach, which again the Minister rightly mentioned, is the integrated approach. The water ministries, this is not new in many countries, the water ministry will not think of the energy, they won't even think about the irrigation, the water supply won't do the housing. So this is one type of problem you continue to have to look at the integrated approach. The second type of problem that we see is to look at this within the water sector, but not looking at comprehensively. You have the agriculture water, of course it's not very relevant in Singapore, and many other big countries where we work the agriculture water, the water for drinking, the rural water supply, urban water supply, drainage, even flood water, so on and so forth, need to be able to look at them holistically. Again, the Singapore approach becomes very, very useful, including in the recent years. I know you've been, as Minister rightly said, the energy-water nexus, and we stress that in bigger countries where we work, the energy, water, and food nexus. So it is not so much relevant here in the urban situation, but in many countries, suppose energy, water, food, and environment becomes another way of looking at the integrated approach. The third area is the most difficult one, which is how to tell to the people that water is not a one-time commodity you drink and then just dispose of. Often we have this discussion at the head of the state level, look, we do have alternative to energy, but you don't have alternative to water. So how to turn this into a reuse water, the 3 R's which have been mentioned before briefly, the reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. And there is a cost to that, but where you have a problem, I think the technology is a solution sometimes, but one has to keep on working on that. There's the awareness part to this, which was mentioned before. I went one time to my children's school many, many years ago to give a talk on water. And I said the same thing that I'm saying here now. Look, there is no alternative to water. For energy, you have alternative. And one primary school kid, he raised the hand and says, no, I don't care about water. I can live on Coca-Cola. And the other guy who was from the middle school guy said, no, I don't care, I can live with beer. It took us time to tell them that, most of that Coca-Cola is water. Most of that beer is water. I think there's a little bit of that awareness which still is required at all levels. I think something you mentioned, somebody mentioned about the people's level. So that part also is to me important. The other part, the other thing that we tell people of the Singapore story is there's a lot of discussion in our bank, including in many other investment banks, public to private. We should all privatize what we do. Or we should do public-private partnership. It's very, very common. And I think Singapore provides a great model that the public sector can be as efficient, sometimes even more efficient than the private sector. So I'm a strong believer of it. When the public sector can demonstrate that, it becomes a benchmark for the private sector to beat it, if they can. So I think this is a very, very good message in the discussion that we have on privatization. The other point that I'll mention, which has been again mentioned by the Minister of the Economics, have been the pricing the water. Right? This argument you hear everywhere, but without pricing the water, you don't have money for the investment, you don't have the operational maintenance, etc. This is one of our biggest policy dialogue with every country we go to work with. You need to increase your tariff and make it relevant so that you can sustain it. A very, very difficult discussion. Some projects have failed because of this, because if they don't do the right tariff, we don't do the project. Finally, I will mention a few words about a recent, 10 days ago, we launched a book. I don't want to confuse on the books, but we do a study which Ashit knows, Asian Water Development Outlook, every 2-3 years. You were involved in the first one, where the message is what Kishore said, there's enough water but it needs to be managed. This year we look at the water security issue in the Asia-Pacific region. And when you look at about 49 countries, interestingly, 37 of them have water security issues. Water security, we put them in about 5 categories. One, of course, the household water security, the water you need for your household, economic water security. Some countries, some areas would not be able to grow economically, would not be able to grow further because of the water. Third is the urban water security. Fourth is the environmental water security, which is pathetic in most of the countries because of the water quality issues. And finally, we look at the resilience to water-related disaster, which you briefly hinted in your speech. What we find, I might just mention one on 2 points. One on the urban. She mentioned the water losses, non-revenue water losses. And if you look at the reason, just like Ashit says, we always say Singapore, which is about 5% water losses here, I guess, non-revenue. Phnom Penh is about 6%. And then you go to Kuala Lumpur, it's about 33%. So if you plug that hole, there's plenty of money. We don't like to lend anymore to increase your capacity by 10%, 20% when you're losing 30%. But this message is a very, very hard message to give it. Also, well, we started pricing not only for the water, I think we should start pricing for the health aspect, because the public health impact that it creates. A final word on the disaster side. One of the water security area we look at is the natural disaster. Whether it's because of the climate change, which is, at least in our mind, is having a lot of impact in Asia-Pacific region. 90% of the people are affected by water-related disaster in Asia and the Pacific region. That's what our data says. And current cost of flood disaster in the region for 2011 became approximately about $61 billion. Only 5% of the disasters are insured, whereas in the developed countries, about 40% is disaster. And one of our research shows the losses due to disaster is increasing exponentially and much faster than the rate of growth in GDP. So that's another kind of concern we have on this one. But the attention paid by the government on this one is very, very limited. Just to give an example, when we had 2 typhoons in the Philippines, I see a Philippine ADB staff there from, they lost about 2.7% of the GDP. And if you have a population growth of about 3% and 2.7%, you probably are on a negative growth for the year. And Thailand had it at about 11% of the GDP. So I think this area of the disaster, it has to be looked into. Although the nature of the disaster you may find in Singapore and some other cities is different, but certainly needs to be looked into very, very carefully, because it seems to be having a huge impact on the economy as well as the lives. And Asia seems to have the highest number of people who have died because of natural disaster when you take the global data, which is more than 50% in Asia.